If you observe historical events, policy shifts, or scientific phenomena without a framework, you just see a chaotic sequence of things happening. But when a researcher applies rigorous analytical thinking, a hidden structural relationship appears. The cause-effect genre investigates the mechanics of why a specific event happened and the exact scope of its consequences. Competence in this genre extends far beyond the English classroom. Tracing these action-result relationships reflects the exact reasoning required for higher-level scientific inquiry, historical explanation, and complex policy analysis. Building a verifiable causal argument requires three specific components: the correct macroarchitecture to organize the variables, precise micromechanisms to explain the hidden processes, and exact linguistic signals to connect the ideas. Research data remains inert unless these connections are present. Without them, even the most compelling evidence fails to prove a relationship between two events. Building these arguments requires the same precision used to solve structural engineering problems. That engineering process begins with a primary architectural decision. You must choose how to organize your essay, and there are two distinct patterns: block organization and chain organization. Block organization is required when multiple independent causes lead to a single effect. It also applies when one cause produces several distinct effects that do not trigger one another. Take the massive surge in mobile language learning apps like Duolingo. We can identify several distinct driving factors: the widespread availability of smartphones, the low cost compared to private tutors, and the engaging features of gamification. This diagram illustrates a block structure. Notice how these three separate variables operate independently. The cost of the app does not cause smartphones to exist. Instead, all three factors flow in parallel to produce a single, unified outcome: widespread app adoption. Chain organization is the necessary alternative when your variables are tightly interdependent. You use this when each development is logically contingent on the one that immediately precedes it. This diagram maps a sequential cascade. Here, the initial effect instantly becomes the direct cause of the next event, creating a chain reaction. Consider telecommuting. Remote work causes employees to migrate to suburbs. That migration immediately becomes a new cause, driving up housing demand. This sudden population influx into suburban neighborhoods causes local housing prices to surge. In turn, those surging prices trigger the displacement of lower-income families who can no longer afford the area. Choosing the wrong macrostructure breaks the essay's logic, because the written form must accurately reflect the mathematical reality of the variables being analyzed. Even with the correct macrostructure, writers often fail at the paragraph level. The most common critical error in academic writing is asserting that a relationship exists between 2 points without explaining the pathway connecting them. This diagram shows a common trap. Claiming an app causes vocabulary improvement is an unproven assertion. Without exposing the internal process, you only state event A happened before event B. To fix this, explicitly identify the causal mechanism, the specific gears connecting cause to effect. For language apps, the mechanism is algorithmic spaced repetition. The software forces learners to recall words at strategically timed intervals. This creates the exact conditions of retrieval practice that cognitive psychology identifies as optimal for long-term memory retention. You cannot guess at these mechanisms. They must be supported by empirical research, peer-reviewed studies, or verified statistical data. A body paragraph only succeeds when it exposes these hidden gears. Doing so transforms a mere opinion into a verifiable academic proof. Once you establish the mechanism, you must determine its depth. Analyzing a complex phenomenon requires looking at multiple levels of causation to avoid reaching superficial conclusions. This iceberg diagram illustrates the difference in depth. At the surface, you have the immediate cause. This is the direct, proximate action that triggers an event. For example, if a student decides to download a language app today, the immediate cause is highly visible. A friend recommended it to them. But underlying that single action is a remote cause. These are the deeper structural conditions that make the immediate cause physically or economically possible in the first place. A friend's recommendation only leads to a download because mobile internet access has reached a saturation point, and the device hardware is universally accessible. Failing to analyze these underlying structural conditions limits your scope. An essay that stops at immediate causes is only observing symptoms, entirely missing the root drivers of the phenomenon. Finally, the most structurally sound argument will still fail if it is built with the wrong linguistic materials. The logical flow relies entirely on the precise deployment of transitional signals. Notice the distinct wording in this graphic. Cause signals and effect signals function as load-bearing structural elements. Misusing a connector like because instead of consequently reverses the mathematical flow of your argument. A frequent mistake is using words like thus or therefore simply to transition to the next thing you want to say, or to introduce a brand new claim. The word therefore has a strict function. It must only be used to introduce a logical conclusion that follows necessarily from the verified evidence you just provided. The same precision applies to basic terminology. As shown here, confusing the verb affect, meaning to influence, with the noun effect, meaning the result, breaks the mechanical function of the sentence. A rigorous analytical argument leaves nothing to chance. It requires a macro structure reflecting reality, body paragraphs mapping exact mechanisms, and language signaling absolute precision.